Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Divergent discussion. I'm Michelle, the founder of Caboose. We are here to create belonging, understanding, and support of neurodivergent people. At the heart of what we do are Neuro Nuggets, which are our short, practical guides to help you understand how your brain works and find ways to make life and work easier. We also work with workplaces to help managers create more inclusive spaces. We've got Jessie here today, so I'm very excited to welcome Jessie David, who has also created some Neuro Nuggets for us. So you'll be able to jump in there after this and take a look at those. So welcome, Jessie. I'm going to read your bio because, I can't memorize that much in my head at the moment. So Jessie David is originally from Sri Lanka and has a background that has been deeply has influenced her personal and professional journey. She's the founder of Bai Yan, a not-for-profit connecting members of the diaspora with young girls in Sri Lanka. You'll correct my pronunciation there. My dyslexia is not very good when it comes to these things. Jessie has a beautifully diverse career from teaching to engineering to now learning at a tech company, and she brings a deep curiosity for intersectional identity and neurodivergent experience. Jessie, as I mentioned, has also recently worked with us creating Neuro Nuggets with her expertise. So we will definitely be touching on that later. So welcome, Jessie.
Thanks, Michelle. It's very exciting.
And it's very exciting because Jessie and I have met quite a few times, so it's always good to have a call with someone that you know. So Jessie, for people meeting you for the first time, when did ADHD start to make sense to you and become part of your story? I know you and I have connected on that, but for our audience.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it was actually by accident. So in 2023, I was a people partner at sorry, not an ed tech company, a tech company, but they did videos through the browser. And being a people partner, I wanted to support my engineering team. And so one of the engineers told me she had ADHD. So I was like, okay, let me take a look into this and make sure that I'm informed so that I can support her properly and support my team properly. But then the more videos that I watched, the more I was like, oh, this all sounds very familiar. And then suddenly there were these parts of my life that like forgetfulness or anxiety or time blindness or planning or like just my desire to always be doing new things and being able to like jump careers and places. I was like,
Yeah,
this is all really starting to make sense. So I think that's
yeah.
sort of when it started to click.
Amazing. Yeah. It is the case for many of us for sure. I also felt the same after my daughter was diagnosed because my son had been diagnosed for many years. But I think the fascinating thing with ADHD is that the presentation can be quite different across individuals. But certainly now that I understand my brain better, I can explain some of the, too many tabs open, trying to do too many things and then, you're having the kind of exhaustion as a result of taking on too many things. And
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, the variety of things, like you say, variety of careers or industries. Yeah,
Yeah. But
that's
it's
really
like
cool.
you actually start to make sense about who you are once you're like, okay, I'm not just not trying or I'm not just forgetful. Like there's a
Yeah.
reason. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And it's funny when you and I met, the similarities of working in the HR space and, working in the business partnering and now also in tech. I spent 10 years in tech as well. So I'm very excited for this conversation to talk all things ADHD and tech. But
Right.
we're here to hear from you. So tell me, what's one ADHD in tech moment that really captures the reality, whether it's maybe the funny version or the difficult version, because there is a dark side, to ADHD.
Yes, there definitely can be, but I think I'll go with the sort of funny version.
Okay, good.
So one of the companies I was at, they were planning a company-wide trip to Panama, which was really cool.
Yeah.
This is at a time when every tech company was like, "Oh, we're all remote, so we all have to go to some place that none of us have been to, or maybe a few of us have been to." So that was cool and fun. So as being a part of the senior leaders decided putting all of your coworkers together in one space, probably need a sexual harassment training to make sure that we're all having a good time and it doesn't turn into an HR nightmare. And so the L&D lead, he had created the training and he had created a script, but he, for some reason, on the day of the training, couldn't do it. And then all of the other folks, like all of the other people partners and the senior leaders, they were just too anxious and nervous to give a training to like 300 people at the very last minute. But for whatever reason, my brain was like, oh, yeah, I know this stuff. Like, I could do it in my sleep because I've been obsessed with like power dynamics and all of these like sort of like consent and all of these sort of dynamics that go into understanding how to relate to people. And so I've read more than enough on it. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. No problem. And I think that's because like when there's like a crisis mode, if you're a neurotypical person, then your brain sort of goes into like anxiety and but as an ADHD person, if it's something that you feel confident in and your brain almost starts to act like a neurotypical person. And so in a
Yeah.
crisis, you're like, yeah, okay, no problem. So and I've had that happen multiple times where in a crisis, like even at a
Yes.
friend's wedding, I was able to, like, step up and, like, tell everybody exactly what they needed to do when everything seemed sort of in disarray, and I think that's
Yeah.
sort of one of the benefits of having ADHD is that in places where other people might struggle, you actually do shine, and
Mm.
I think those are the parts we don't talk about enough because a lot of the times it can feel more like a burden than a gift.
Yes. Yeah. It is. I was reading something uh, a week or two ago about the ADHD in a crisis, and I've certainly seen that not only in myself but also my son. When there's a crisis, and he was volunteering for the SES, you could really see him shine in those situations.
Mhm.
So it's definitely a nice strength of
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, okay, there are some benefits here.
yeah. I'm always very pro thinking about the strengths, people's strengths, and there are definitely, I don't want to underplay the difficulties, but
Mhm.
certainly for some people there can be, this superpower, which I know people don't always like that term, but I think for some people there can be, and it sometimes depends on um, the diagnosis in terms of whether
Yeah.
you have other coexisting conditions. So I
I
guess
think
for people, yeah,
well, I was just gonna say, I think one of the parts of it is once you've accepted it, then you can learn to adjust the system for what works for you.
yes,
And
that's
so I think
true.
that's a big part of leaning into the superpower, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of looking at it. I think it's leaning into it and working out your own adjustments to life,
Yeah.
and work where you can. Obviously, it is sometimes more difficult, especially, you know I think some of the difficult parts, are meetings, multitasking or task prioritization, and some people deal with that very well and some people find
Yeah.
it challenging. Do you have any kind of tips or things that you think about in that space?
Yeah, I think like for in tech, especially if it's a startup or scale up where a lot of my experience has been, you can be expected to pivot a lot, which can be really challenging because
Mm.
that executive function capacity is a bit smaller than you would a
Yes,
neurotypical person, then your
yes,
brain is sort of doing like cartwheels to continually adjust to what's expected of you. And
yes,
so for me, that was an experience that I found especially challenging where there wasn't as much clarity around like what was expected and what we were trying to achieve as a team. And so
yeah,
then you start one thing and then something else comes up and then you start another thing. And so if there aren't clear goals and that clear structure, it can definitely be, I think, very overwhelming for somebody like in the tech and startup space. So context
Yes.
switching can be, I think that can be one of the biggest challenges.
Mm,
Another example for me was, I would be in like deep focus and like kind of finally get to that task initiation and like get into the work where like that's where that flow state exists. And then I'd get
yes.
a Slack huddle or a Slack ping being like, hey, can you join this huddle? And so without that context, it's like brain's like, okay, what's going on? And then it takes a lot of energy to keep up with this new context and then to
Yes.
initiate the task again. So I think those are the parts that can be really challenging when you're working
Mm.
online and working in a tech environment.
Yeah, agree. I was actually listening to your Neuro Nuggets when I was on my exercise bike the other day, and I was reflecting on that. Startups are really hard, and I've worked in a few startups, a few scale ups, and then tech that's more established. And Caboose is a startup, right? So we're constantly doing too many things, and people have multiple parts of their jobs. I think that's also really hard. Is whether you're the founder and you're doing the finances or hosting these or doing meetings, trying to sell the product. There's a lot of hats everybody wears.
Mhm.
And I think that can be very tricky. And I think the other thing, depending on your ADHD presentation, is the tasks, right?
Mhm.
Like how do you stay on top of things? And it's not a one size fits all. Everybody has a different way of staying on top of the tasks, particularly when you have so many hats. I think that's
Yeah,
very tricky.
I think that's so true. And especially like based on the presentation, you
Mm,
might say, oh, here are these like five things that you might experience if you have ADHD. But then, I would watch videos that said, oh, like in school you would struggle. But I didn't struggle in school.
yeah,
But
right.
that's
Nor
also
did my
because you're
daughter.
like very singularly focused. And for me, I was like,
Yes,
this is my job. I am learning. So it
yes,
definitely kind of figuring out what your own presentation style is, however you go about that. I think that also
yes.
helps a lot too.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
What do you think that most people misunderstand about ADHD at work?
I think at work, sometimes if you don't really know what it is, and I think we grew up with this image, the stereotypical image of the little boy in the classroom just like running around creating chaos, and that's all we
Yes.
know. And like maybe that's one version of it, but there are like multiple versions of it. And so I
Mm,
think that kind of gets translated into the adult, like the professional life, because a lot of people don't have a new or different definition. So managers can often think, okay, this person has ADHD, so this is an extra burden.
yes.
But in fact, it really isn't, because a lot of the supports that a person with ADHD needs are the things that are good for business, like
Mm,
having a clear goal, not pivoting every month, having structure, writing down meeting notes. And so
mm.
I think just having that shift in mindset with managers would help a lot for the managers for the business and the ADHD.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so true. The sort of preconceived idea about ADHD, people have, and sometimes it's because of stereotypes that have happened over many years. But I look at both my children and even myself, and I think we all present differently. There can be risk taking, and that can be very dangerous with some ADHDers. Then there can be losing things and you know,
That would be
like, and then there can be the hyperactivity with too many tabs open you know,
yeah.
and those sorts of things, or being distracted by, oh, well, I'm guilty of that is like I'll have too many tabs open and I'll jump onto that tab and then I will have gone back to my email and then I will end up down there doing something,
Yeah.
and I'll be like, oh, yes, that's right. I was meant to be working on that other thing.
Yeah. And then 5 times later, you're like, wait, what was I originally trying to do?
Yes, exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So where do you think, I mean, in tech particularly, because that's what we're here to talk about,
Yeah.
where do ADHD brains often shine? What brings out the, you know, kind of the best, I suppose, in ADHD as in tech?
Yeah, I think it's like I mentioned before, like I think ADHDers can really shine in a crisis and in startups and scale ups and the growing businesses, there's often a crisis. And so they're
Yes.
really, I think, able to step up and kind of pull all the different pieces together and see what other people can't. I think the other benefit too is they can sometimes act like canaries in a coal mine. So they're able to see because they need more like support and they're able to see and put pieces together. They can see when a challenge is coming and when it's going to be a problem even before other people in the business do. So I think those
Mm,
are two really excellent areas. Like in terms of the functions, I think ADHDers and myself included would do really well in software development. So incredibly structured. Like you have an agile cycle, you have a sprint, you have a retro, you go in, you
yes.
like look at all the work, you talk about it, you point it, and then everyone is assigned and everything is documented. So there's like an
Yes.
incredible amount of structure in software development, which really
Yes.
helps the ADHD brain because then you're not trying to figure things out on your own. It's all written down. So you can
Yes.
then go away and do that super deep focus work. And like what I've noticed too in my experience is there are lots of software developers who have ADHD or
Mm,
autism or some combination of the two.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the structure definitely
Mhm.
helps. If you think about organizations, maybe that, tech companies that don't have that structure though, like what's your kind of wish for, an organization in terms of what could they do to design the best job?
Design.
Like had, or, even for managers, I guess, to manage, better, uh, people with
I mean,
ADHD.
in my ideal world, I think I would start with more compassionate people
Oh,
and people who know how to work with different kinds of minds. Because I think once you open up your mind to the idea that not everybody has to work the same way as you, and you can
mm,
actually achieve more together when you have people who have the different perspectives and different ways of working, then
yes,
I think it starts to become a place you want to be.
yes,
Yeah. So I think really that's where I would start. And then it would sort of yeah, well, and I guess the other bit I would add to that is remote, making sure that it's a remote environment because
yep,
sometimes that like in office politics or like all of the energy, it's especially if you're feeling dysregulated, it can be really easy to pick up on a lot of that other energy and then
mm,
like you sort of start to embody that or you pick that up and then you don't know why you're feeling that way. So
yes,
I think
yes,
also being in a remote environment is incredibly helpful because then everything is also documented, right? Everything has to be written
yes,
down. And so you can go back and look at those things and take the time to put pieces together. So
yes,
those would be
yes,
my two pillars
yeah,
of a ideal
yeah.
working environment.
Do you think fully remote is like there's obviously some real benefits in terms of, the sensory, the politics,
Yeah.
the communication, regulation, but how do managers stay, on top of, you know, productivity and those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think that's where you having like milestones, making sure like as a
Yeah.
manager, if you're putting in milestones so that you have clear check-ins and you have
Yes.
like and that's where like outlining what you're actually trying to achieve and working backwards helps so much because
Mm,
then
mm,
you know when something is off task. But if you don't even know what you're trying to achieve, then
yes.
it doesn't matter whether you're in person or if you're remote, you're
True.
sort of
Yes.
just kind of going all over the place, right? And
Yes.
then like going by gut feel, which doesn't help anybody. So
Yes.
I think the most important part is having those milestones
No.
where it's not so frequent that you feel like you're being micromanaged, but not so far apart that if
Yes.
something isn't going according to plan, you can't like fix that. And I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
one
true.
of the key
That's
skills of
good.
being an author.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for our ADHDers listening, I think one of the hardest things for some, again, it's not for everybody, but are those boring tasks, which, can be, everybody has a bit of boring in their job. How do you get started on those tasks? Like, do you have any tips for people to get
Yeah.
started on those boring admin tasks?
Yeah. I don't always find admin tasks boring, but
No, me neither. I quite like them for a zoning out.
I'll just put like background music in and then my brain can sort of just do whatever it wants to do. But one
Yes.
strategy I've been using lately is writing down my to-do list the night before. And so when you like sort of write down what you need to do, it takes away that anxiety around task initiation, especially if you find something boring. So then you're like, okay, like I can just dive straight in, and then you don't end up procrastinating as much and feeling as flustered because you don't know where to begin. The other thing that I've been doing a lot lately, both personally and at work, is it's called temptation bundling, where you
Oh,
where you pair something that you should do with something you want to do. So like sometimes I'd have to check like in an HRIS system, I'd have to like go and manually check every single like compensation line after we finished a compensation cycle to make sure like that was correct. And
yes.
that was
Yes.
incredibly boring. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
what I would do is
Hearing
I
you.
would, pardon?
I'm hearing you.
Not fun, but has to be done. But I'd like put on the TV and then I'd start with like 5 or 10 minutes of a show. And so that it felt like, oh, okay, whenever I like need that boost, I would kind of like watch 5 minutes of the show and then I'd like get into checking like the numbers and then I could do like 15, 20 minutes. And then when I felt antsy, I would like go back to the show. And so it felt like
Yeah.
actually this is something I'm doing in between the fun thing. It's not
Yeah.
the boring thing that I'm doing. And so even though
That's
it
great.
takes a bit longer because you're, not doing it with your full focus, you don't resent it as much and you get it done, which is much more important than not getting it
Not
done.
doing
And
it.
you have a
Exactly.
good time while you're doing it. So I find like
Yes.
that's really helpful for lots
Yeah.
of things like cleaning, for boring admin work, for
Yeah.
pretty much
Great.
anything.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that
Yeah.
temptation bundling.
Yeah.
That'll be a great thing to share with the community for sure. What about your personal system for prioritizing things, or like managing the time blindness, um, and sort of that keeping up momentum? So I like your idea of the show, but then it can turn into time blindness where you might end up, you know,
Yeah.
watching the whole show and not getting
Yeah.
back to the task.
So you
Or
don't want to do that like, when you have to be somewhere or you have an urgent deadline, but that way,
yes,
but yeah, that's one
yeah.
of the
Yeah, yeah. Tell me, yeah, like how do you, what systems do you have to manage and prioritize tasks? Because, like you say, especially in startups and tech, there can be a lot of tasks and a lot
yeah.
of hats and context switching. So, how do you stay on
Yeah.
top of that? Oh,
So two of the things that I do for myself, they're more sort of techniques, but like when I write everything down, especially from a working context, if you are like, if you have a project to work on, taking that time to sit and sort of outline, okay, what are those milestones in the projects and how do you plan to achieve them? Doing
mm,
that front loaded work first really helps because then as you kind of tackle it and you feel overwhelmed by what to do next, you have a guide. And then the other
mm.
two things that I do is Pomodoro. And so that's where you set a 25-minute timer. And that really
Oh
helps to
yeah,
kind of like put the pressure on and then not feel like, oh, you have to get all of this done in like
mm,
the next three
mm,
hours and body doubling,
mm.
which also
Yeah,
makes you feel like a bit more grounded and okay, now I can
yes.
like get started on this task.
Yeah. Have you used body doubling like at work? And
Yeah,
how has it, how, like what sort of tasks would you use it for?
it's been really good actually. So we just put it in the ADHD, like the neurodivergent chat, and anybody who wanted to join could join. And
Yes.
we would say like, okay, this is what I want to get done in the next 25 minutes. You go on mute, and you turn your video off if you want to. And then at the end of the 25 minutes, you come back and say like, did I get this done or not? And then you get a 5-minute break
Yeah.
and then you can do it again. And
Do it
it's a really
again.
good way to
Yes.
work together, especially in a remote setting and kind of get to know
Yeah.
people without like
Yeah.
sitting there and chatting too long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark has asked, what is body doubling? Which, yes, Mark, when I first heard it, I wasn't sure either. So, Jessie, do you want to tell us what that is?
Yeah, it's just getting work done while you have someone else on the call. So you both come to the call and you have an idea of what you want to get done. So you say in the first 25 minutes, and it's usually 25-minute blocks. So that's like the time of a Pomodoro. Say, I want to get through my emails, or I want to read through this project scope, or,
Mm,
I want to go through this GitHub request. And then you just go on mute, turn off your camera, and it feels different because somebody else is there. And then once you're done, the timer will beep, and then you come off mute and say, like, hey, like, how did the 25 minutes go? And
mm,
then you just say, like, it went well, it didn't go well. And then you just
mm.
keep doing the Pomodoros until you don't want to anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. I think that it's a really great way to have like an accountability type partner for those tasks. And I know I've used it with my daughter, even in cleaning up her room. Maybe it's a helpful body double, but still sometimes when you're all doing some tidying up, it can also
Yeah,
help a lot. And yeah,
it
we
does.
do have a yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
for
right.
if I
Yeah.
sit, she is able to get it done. But if I say, like, go clean your room, it's not
Yeah.
happening.
It's not happening. No.
Yeah.
And there's some other recordings, Mark, on our YouTube channel around body doubling, if you want to scroll back and have a look at a few of those. So I guess getting on to disclosure, it's one of the big topics we talk about here at Caboose is how and if you should disclose to your employer or manager. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you can start with testing the waters. You don't need to come out and, you know, give yourself a label, especially if you don't feel comfortable. And you can start by just making small accommodation requests, which really honestly aren't even accommodation requests because it's good for not just you, but for the whole team and for the whole business. So, for example, if you wanted to say, like, move the times of your meetings, you could say, hey, like, I've noticed like this time sort of interrupts my own workflow. And I've spoken to James and, Janine, and they also aren't as comfortable with this time. Like, what do you think about moving it to the mornings or like late afternoon so that we can get that focus time in? So
Mm,
I don't think you need to explicitly disclose what you need, but just start by making
no,
those small requests. And if you feel that your manager is receptive and you trust them, then you can say, hey, this is what's going on
mm,
with me and this is how you can support. But you don't need to do that
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've often used the phrase, my ADHD brain has too many tabs open at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's a way of disclosing without kind of making it really serious.
Yeah.
But of course, some people do need to ask for, some more adjustments. One of the things that, yeah, we've been doing in some organizations is just awareness, training, like what is ADHD, what is body doubling, what is, the different types of ADHD. And it just does start that conversation and, hopefully continues with the Neuro Nuggets for
Yeah.
organizations as well. Yeah.
I love that.
So, yeah, I think the other thing that people don't realize with ADHD is that sort of emotional regulation, and and I guess I'm curious as to your experience around emotional regulation and what it means in day-to-day work situations.
Yeah. I think like for me, so there's a system that I learned back when I was teaching in Northern Alberta, and it's called internal family systems. And the
Mm,
idea is that you kind of work with a therapist through it, but I think you could do it on your own. But you sort of start to identify different parts of yourself, and
mm,
it's like you can have like a planner part, and can have a protector
mm,
part, and you have a doer part, and you sort of identify these
mm,
different parts of yourself. And that helps you become more self aware of what's going on internally, especially because with
mm.
emotional regulation, like the feelings can feel like they're all coming at once. And then they're
Yes,
all, like they've kind of spun out of control before you realize that you were even feeling
yes,
them in place. So, sort of
yes.
taking time to pay more attention to your internal system helps a lot. Like
Mm.
before I did the internal family systems, I had no idea that I was anxious. And
Yes.
yeah, like I didn't know to name and recognize that feeling. And then once I
Mm.
was sort of do the work of being able to recognize these feelings and what they're
Mm.
doing with my body, then and I could
Mm.
sort of start having a conversation with it. Being like, okay,
Yeah.
like it might sound it's the theory that Inside Out is based on, right? That you
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
to different parts and then it sort of helps you separate yourself from the anger. Like you are not angry. There's a part of you that's angry or frustrated. And then
Yeah.
you can have a
Yeah.
conversation with it. And so then it moves your brain from that like fear center to the more like
Mm.
calm center, like
Yes.
the frontal
Yeah.
cortex. So I think that's really helpful.
Mm.
And another
Mm.
technique that I find works really well with emotional regulation, once you're sort of able to build that awareness, is the five senses grounding technique, where it's like five
Oh,
things
yes.
I hear, four things, or five things I see, four things I hear, or four things I can
Yes.
touch and smell, taste,
Yeah.
and the fifth one.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
really like that actually. That's a great one. And there's another similar one which I've used in the past is if you want to go for a walk, try and look for the different types of greens you can see on your walk.
Yeah.
Because, if you look at the plants and the grass and all of that, you actually can see a lot of different shades of green, which is
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yes. Exactly. And then it
Yeah.
gets you out of
Yeah.
like sort of all-consuming
Yeah.
feeling of that moment.
Yeah, yeah. I was talking to a community member today actually about that, trying to sort of be curious about your feelings and be curious about what's going on in your body,
Mhm.
whether it's a sensory overload or lights,
Yeah.
or just, at the moment here it's quite hot and muggy. And so just, being very curious about how that's affecting your body. And as you
Mm,
say, naming it, you start to learn about how your
yeah.
brain is processing things.
Yes. Yeah, I've even noticed, like, with the lights, like, even, like, that softer yellow lighting, it
Yeah,
has this calming effect, and
it does. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Not these bright
Yeah, right, yeah,
lights.
same.
So yeah, well, we're coming to the end, but I'd really love for you to tell our audience about the Neuro Nuggets you've contributed to for Caboose, and yeah, just maybe share some of the topics you created.
Yeah, and I it was really fun to create it. I thought I knew a lot about ADHD, but as I was, like, kind of creating the videos, I was like, "Wait, but why does that happen?" And so it was
Mm,
really fun, and I think it's just especially if, you're neurodivergent, it's hard to just sit there and watch something for an hour and then absorb it. So being able to, for me, is like being able to just watch a little bit of content, go back to it, absorb, process, and go back at a time when you're ready. I thought that was it's a really brilliant idea and super helpful. The content I created was around ADHD in the workplace, so a lot of what we touched upon today is covered in a lot of details in those Neuro Nuggets, just around like how to
yes.
advocate for yourself, what it is, what are the symptoms, so to speak, of ADHD, and
Mm,
then how to approach it
mm,
with yourself, and just how to work as a team and what makes ADHD work for you. So lots of
yeah.
little solid bits of
Yeah.
learning, especially from my
Yeah.
experience as a people partner.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, if you're watching this now or later, yeah, jump into Caboose. You'll see the Neuro Nuggets in the app, and all of our content is around 6 to 8 minutes, which is the ideal time for neurodivergent brains to watch and absorb. We have, yeah, Neuro Nuggets sort of covering work and life. So it can be sensory, it can be these productivity hacks that Jessie has been talking about today. It can be disclosure, body doubling. There's quite a few there. There's also a number of series that are dedicated to managers to help managers create more neuro-inclusive workplaces. And soon we will have educational content, so for teachers to help make classrooms more accessible for our kiddos. which then sets them up for success later in life as well. So, yeah, well, Jessie, thank you so much for joining us today and being part of not only Neuro Nuggets, but also these conversations. And I'm sure there's more we can learn from you, and we'd love to welcome you back for another session sometime in the next few months.
Oh, thank you. This was so fun.
Yeah, and for everybody, the replay will be back up on YouTube at at some stage, if not today, early next week. And you can watch the other ones there too, as I've popped in the chat there. The link for our YouTube and all the other content is in the Caboose app, so jump in there as well. Thank you very much.
All
Thanks,
right.
Mark. Thanks, Adam.